So today I want to talk about multimeters. They're a big tool for your toolbox if you do a lot of troubleshooting and diagnostic work, or well, they should be. So what do I use? And if I use it, it's got to be pretty cheap as well. So what are some good options? I just want to say before we get into these meters, looking at the individual meters here, I'm not getting paid for any of this, no sponsorships, nothing. I'm just trying to, if I can save somebody a buck and say, hey, this is a decent meter and I'm using it, it seems to be okay, and it can save you some money over like a $300, $400, $500 meter that maybe you don't need or use all the time. You're just going to keep in your toolbox to use a couple times a year or something, then yeah, that's the purpose of this. So no sponsorships, no money, unfortunately. I'd be happy to take money if somebody wants to give it to me, but anyway, let's look at the meters. So I've got some multimeters here that I use on a daily basis that I've been using the last couple years. Some of them I've had for 20 years or more, and well, that's a long time, and while they are good meters, they don't necessarily do the trick as well as some other ones, but I just figured I'd take a look at them and show you what I use on a daily basis, and something a newer one I found that is really cheap and actually does a really good job. And well, it's hard to find something like that, so I figured I'd highlight it for just a second. So here's some of the meters that I've been using lately in the last 2 years. So all of these do your basic voltage and ohms and things like that. Some of them have some diode testing and like the audible beep feature for testing continuity in circuits and things like that, which is really handy. 2 of them you'll see have amp clamps and 2 of them don't. So a big thing in diagnostic, especially for equipment and automotive, is amperage, so that you can check for amp draws and things, parasitic draws, things like that. And like this basic fluke meter, which is a decent meter, it won't do amperage, which is a big drawback. If you're just looking for continuity and voltage, something like this, I think like Walmart sells this one or something like that. And I have used this a good deal. It's very small, portable, nice, fits in your hand. I have, beat it around a good bit. The only problem is I find that this battery in here, I think it uses like AAA's. Yeah, it uses AAA's, and sometimes when I let it sit in my truck, I don't know if it's corrosion or whatever, even though this is sealed and everything, sometimes I have to move the batteries and roll them around. Like right now, these are good batteries and I'm not sure it'll even turn on. Yeah, see, I don't know. I haven't been using it lately because it's been really flaky the last year or so. I don't know. It's just really flaky. Anyway, I probably won't be keeping this in my toolbox anymore. This is an older Harbor Freight. The new ones are the same. They're just like red. This is a newer Harbor Freight, and this thing, it's not terribly accurate, but man, is it bulletproof. The new ones aren't quite as good. They tend to blow fuses easily and things like that because this has a high amperage. This has a 10 amp separate lead that you have to move the lead up for the high amperage to run it through the fuse. But this will measure amperage. It goes all the way up to 10 amps. But it's really handy because it'll do amperage. The only downside is it doesn't have an amp clamp and also that amp limitation. You have to remember to move it, otherwise you fry your meter. The red ones are almost the exact same ones, same setup and everything. This one doesn't have the audible beep for checking ohms and everything, but you can still check ohms on the readout. The battery in this thing is like the original battery from 15 years ago or something ridiculous like that. I mean, these things are, even the little red ones, if you actually take care of them, they're actually fairly decently bulletproof. They're just a basic meter. They don't do anything other than the basic stuff. But the reason I have this in my toolbox, along with the expensive stuff, is it's a good fallback for measuring amps, especially if you've only got this. For a while, I was just carrying these 2 because they're smaller and easier to move around. So this one over here, practically an antique. This is a Universal Enterprises meter. It has an amp clamp, but this is only for AC current. It will not measure DC current. As you can see, there's only one setting for DC. It is the only analog meter I have. in my toolbox at the moment. I have a bunch of them, but this was an expensive meter back in the day, and it's a real good meter. You can adjust the zero calibration here and everything, and it does have a needle lock that apparently doesn't work great anymore. But it has different ohm. It obviously doesn't have a beep for continuity, but it does have different ohm settings. You can multiply for really highly sensitive ohm readings. You can go all the way down to times 100, and it is really nice for that feature. And it doesn't jump around sometimes like a digital meter does. So sometimes I just prefer an analog meter because I can see what the needle's doing, especially for things like turn signals that are harder to see on a digital meter because the number's just all over the place and you don't know if that's the turn signal actually putting through the full voltage or whatever. But on a turn signal, you can see for a second it'll go all the way up to 12 volts and back, you know, just like a hand on a clock. It's really easy to keep track of when you're doing stuff like that. And obviously the amp clamp for AC, but I actually don't use that very much. This on the side is for fine calibration on the needle. For you calibrate it at 0 and then you can measure from there. And then there's this one, and this is my latest favorite, and the whole reason I'm doing this video because I got this for like $40 online. They sell them on Fleabay, they sell them on the Jungle website, all of that. And best of all, this amp clamp does DC and AC, which is great for automotive work because checking for parasitic draws, you don't have to check, you don't have to pull a line and put your meter in line into the battery cable or anything. You just clamp it around the battery cable and check parasitic draw like that. And this is auto detecting. It'll auto detect AC or DC. There's no, you don't have to tell it AC or DC. The only main drawback, and it's not really a drawback, it's just kind of an annoyance, is when you're checking ohms, if you want the beeper, you have to set it to that. But you can cycle through diode testing, auto. It really won't beep on auto, but you can go to diode testing, you can go to the beep, and it'll, you know, that way if you can't see your meter to check continuity and you're just checking the continuity in a circuit, you can just set your meter off to the side and listen for the beep. It's really handy. I don't know what battery is in this thing, but I've been abusing it and it's held up really well. And I have actually used the DC amp clamp a couple times since I've had this already, and it works fantastic. This is a great cheap little meter with a DC and AC amp clamp. It does go up to 600 amps AC or DC, which is great. I don't know how high the voltage goes. I'm assuming into the hundreds. Well, it'd have to be in the hundreds, but it probably goes up to 600, 900 volts. Even though I probably wouldn't use it regularly for that. It does have a hold option. You can hold your reading, and then you can release it again. The H for hold will come on down there. That way, if you need to record a meeting, or if you need to record a reading, you can press that hold button and take your meter over to your notepad or whatever, and then release it when you're done with it. We'll check hertz, which a lot of these meters don't do. Obviously, the analog meter won't do it, and the Harbor Freight meter won't do it. This cheap Walmart Fluke meter does do hertz, but it's really cheap and it has a lot of functions. I don't know how well the temp function works. So right now it says 43°C Fahrenheit, 110. I don't know where it's measuring the temperature. I mean, it's sitting out here in the sun. It's warm. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's interesting. I have not used that feature. So, but it's nice. It does have a timer. If you leave it on for more than like 5 minutes or something, it'll turn itself off to save the battery. It is really nice. There's only 2 meter holes, so you can't get confused. Kind of like this cheap Walmart one. And you don't have to remember to put it into the high amp panel like the other one, or like this one. If you're measuring voltage, you have to put it over there. But if you're measuring amperage or if you're measuring ohms or doing diode testing, you got to move your leads over to the other side. You know, a lot of the old meters are that way. That's just the way they are. They're wired internally. But now with the digital wonderfulness inside this stuff, it can automatically interpret and route internally. So this so far has been my go-to. Even I haven't even had to use this as much lately. A lot of the time, you know, in the olden days, I would swap back between like this one and a cheap digital, depending on what I was doing. If I was just measuring some voltage real quick, I would grab, you know, the Fluke or whatever and run and get that. But you can spend a couple $100s on a good meter pretty fast, and they'll do, you know, basically these functions. But this, I am really impressed with this meter. It has so many functions, and especially the amperage clamp, which is a big draw for me and the main reason I got it. But it does everything, so I don't really need another meter at the moment. And yes, at the moment I am carrying all 4 of these on the truck, just because I do so much diagnostic and troubleshooting, and you never know when you're going to need this fallback or what have you. But I mean, it doesn't take up much room in the toolbox. I just throw it in there. And you know, sometimes there were some days I couldn't get this cheap Fluke meter to work. Now Fluke, you know, they're a big name in the industry and they're supposed to be real good, but I have not been very impressed with whatever over the battery power setup works in there. And I don't even know if it's corrosion or anything. Like this also has an automatic shutdown. I don't know if that's part of the I'll see there. Oh, there, it wants to turn on. You never know when it's going to turn on and when it's not. So you see there, it's not going to go on again. I think it's part of the internals. Oh, there. Okay, after a wait. Just gotta wait a second. Well, now it's working right now. But again, like all digital meters these days, it has an auto range feature, which is really nice. It's just quick and easy. You do have to change between DC, AC or DC voltage when you measure that. Whereas on this meter, it detects. You just put it, I want to measure voltage, you put it on voltage, it'll automatically detect AC or DC. Not that I switch back and forth that much. Most of the stuff I do is DC because it's equipment or automotive or trucks or something like that. So anyway, I don't get paid for this or anything, no sponsorships or anything. I just want to try to save people money if and when I can. And I thought I'd point out that these meters, you know, the various limitations of them and what I do with them on a daily basis for troubleshooting, and actually how good this is. This is a Weaver, if that's how you say it, brand EM4370. And it's a little doubtful because you go in there, I ordered it and I wasn't sure if it would measure DC, but I was talking with another tech, and he was saying, yeah, I think that one measures DC with the clamp. He said, I'm not sure, but you can get one and try it out. And so I did. I figured $40 wasn't a big risk, and I could use a replacement meter anyway that was more dependable. When you look at some of their documentation online and their manuals and things, they don't necessarily say that it measures DC with the clamp. And I think somewhere I read that it doesn't measure DC with the clamp, and it was on a listing maybe, but it does, which is very, very convenient. It's hard to find a cheaper DC clamp meter, and for $40, how can you go wrong? I mean, if something goes wrong with it in the future, I will let you know, but for the moment, this is my go-to meter, and it's so handy right out of the toolbox. You know, you don't have to spend more than 2 seconds setting it up and trying to turn it on, whereas this old Fluke over here takes a couple minutes for me to get fired up, you know, which it shouldn't. It should be dependable. But I still have my old fallback analog meter if I need it. So anyway, that was just a quick look at a few meter options if you're doing some diagnostic and troubleshooting work, and hopefully this helps someone. You know, it's hard to find decent tools for a cheap price. A lot of the time you can automatically assume, oh well, an expensive tool, that's pretty good, and sometimes they are, but it's hard to know which cheap tools are good. So maybe this will help somebody out. If it does, pass it along. Feel free to share, like, subscribe. I always appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.